We should also probably lay down why there's not a D or an F tier for this tier list. We don't think any of them are that bad.
Yeah, they're all good at something.
Yeah, it's basically that easy. So, even if you start out with one of the C tier classes, don't worry about it too much. You'll probably be fine as the game goes on. Just some of these have a little bit more advantage to the start or to a certain type of build. So yeah, first up, Scholar, which starts out with some interesting stats. They have the most mind and the most intelligence, the least strength. Start out at level 6, and their starting equipment is the Astrologer armor, which I think is okay against magic, but not very good against anything else. And then for starting equipment, they get Glintstone Pebble, which is a great spell. Glintstone Arc, which I don't think I've ever used.
Yeah, it's kind of just, it costs more FP than the Pebble doesn't. Just not as efficient to use.
Yeah, they start out with the short sword, which is not really the best starting straight sword, but that's okay. You can get other straight swords pretty early on if you want to stay with something like that. Astrologer Staff, which is probably the best starting staff, although there's only 2, and you're going to switch it out for the Meteor Staff anyway.
Yeah.
And then the Scripture Wooden Shield, which kind of sucks at everything for a shield, so it's sort of whatever.
Yeah, I even forgot they started with a shield.
Yeah.
But
Nobody uses it.
yeah.
Then again, if you're looking for shields usually aren't too bad to pick up early either.
If you're going pure caster, it's the best one for that.
Which
It just
is pretty easy to use.
yeah, the main problem is just the lower vigor at the start.
Mm.
You just need to avoid getting hit.
Yeah, that is true. And if you're going with an intelligence build, a lot of people don't like to build vigor right away, which is usually a mistake. You should probably build vigor at the start, at least some vigor.
The real problem with astrology is like the mid game. Like Altus Plateau can be really rough.
Yeah.
Until you actually get like a good spell.
Where do you think, Rob, as a starting class? I'm thinking probably like A tier-ish, because you're the best caster.
Yeah, I think it's probably A1.
All right.
It's a really easy class to use. It's just squishy.
Yeah, that's fair. Mage, squishy, but not too bad. Next class is Bandit, which Bandit's kind of an interesting one. Bandit has the most arcane.
Starts out 14 arcane and 13 dexterity. It's its highest stats.
Yeah. So, and then it's got kind of average stats for everything else.
Yeah.
Which is okay.
It does start at level 5 though, so it is the second lowest level class.
That is true. Bandit gear, I honestly don't know if that's great for anything. I think it's lightweight, and it seems to have decent immunity, focus, and stuff. Great Knife is your starting weapon, which isn't really the greatest starting weapon because it's a dagger. It does have bleed on it, which is nice, and doesn't weigh anything. Also has quick step. Short bow isn't really that great because you don't really have any way of inflicting statuses at the start, and it can cost you a lot of money if you want to go with arrows. You have bone arrows, which are okay too, and then you have a buckler, which the buckler is really good because it has the best parry in the game.
So if you go for parries early, it can be good. But...
yeah. So if you wanted to go with buckler and then maybe buy like a rapier or something early on, or get an S-stock early on.
yeah, you can't just buy like the dagger from the Twin Maiden Husk. I think that has like 140 crit on it.
Okay, yeah. So you got some. Well, you could also potentially just have the guys drop a dagger because they drop daggers pretty often.
Having like a high amount of arcane early doesn't really help you.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't really infuse your weapons with something unless you get like Bloody Slash.
Which that would be good.
Yeah, it's just the bleed buildup early on isn't too much different between having arcane and not having arcane.
Yeah, you could just go with a bleed weapon early. Like you could grab the Morning Star. Yeah, should we put it to C tier then?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I think Bandit is probably one of the weaker starting classes, but it's not terrible or anything.
Yeah, like once you get going, then there's some pretty good arcane weapons.
That is true, yeah. You just don't really have any to start out with.
Yeah, it's just getting going with Bandit that's kind of rough.
Up next is Confessor, which we kind of talked about Confessor off stream, or off recording, where Confessor is kind of a weird one.
It's the highest leveled starting class, but...
but then it doesn't really focus on anything, because it isn't the highest statted in any one stat.
Yeah, like it starts with faith and like mind, like a bit of dexterity and a bit of strength. But
yeah.
It's really just not specialized.
Yeah, no specialization from Confessor whatsoever. The Confessor armor seems okay.
Yeah.
Nothing really special about it, but it's fairly lightweight, which is nice. Starting equipment, you get Urgent Heal, which that one's pretty nice to start out with. You can kill the Revenants later on, when they show up. You also get
Yeah.
Assassin's Approach, which can be useful for just sneaking through areas. You get the Broadsword, which is a really great starting sword.
Yeah.
You get the Finger Seal, so you can actually cast these things, which is nice. And then you also get the Blue Crested Heater Shield. I forgot they even got a shield, but it does have 100% physical negation, so that's nice.
Yeah. The only problem is like urgent heal isn't an area heal; it's a self heal.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah. So it doesn't even hit revenants. You need to like buy the regular heal.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess you get a little bit more sustain early on, which can be kind of useful if you're just going around killing random stuff or maybe certain weapons. Confessor is, I don't know, you think C tier as well? I think Confessor is probably one of the weaker ones too, but for like a different reason than Bandit.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
It's
right.
just it's not better than the other classes at doing anything specific.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Bandit struggles to start out with because you have stats that don't really help in the starting game. Confessor has like every stat, but it still doesn't help you in the early game because you have every stat. All right, up next is Hero, which Hero has the most amount of strength out of any of the classes and has high vigor as well. Downsides, though, are kind of the other things that you start out with, or the lack of stuff that you start out with compared to some of the classes.
Yeah.
Because you get the battle axe, which is an okay weapon, but axes aren't necessarily the strongest because they have short reach, so against larger enemies they can kind of be rough, but against small enemies they're pretty good. Human-sized enemies, they're really good. You get the large leather shield, which is kind of a mass shield. It doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, I always just unequip the shield and two-handed axe.
Yeah, and then the champion's armor is also nothing really special. It doesn't weigh very much. It's okay on defenses.
Yeah, it just doesn't really take advantage of like your higher endurance than some of the other class.
Yeah.
Like the highest endurance, and it just has really light armor.
Well, they have the second highest endurance.
Who has more?
Samurai.
Oh,
Yeah, they have 12. Samurai has 13. They have one more.
Samurai has the highest one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is one of the problems with Heroes, just the starting 9 decks.
Hmm.
Makes it so you generally have to put a point in just to get to 10.
Yeah.
Use a lot of stuff.
That is true, because a lot of great swords require 10. I mean, if you're only going great axes, it's not so bad, but if you're going to go with like halberds or great swords or colossal swords, most of them require some level of dex. Not a whole lot, but some.
Like great hammers, a lot of those don't even have like a dexterity requirement on them.
Yeah, that's true, because you can just two-hand the large club right away, and
Yeah.
you'll be fine. If you're just going with a strength build, I think Hero is probably one of the best choices, but I still think I'd probably say it's like A tier, just because of all the other
Yeah.
stuff that comes along with it.
Yeah, probably.
Like, it is really good to start out with if you're going with a strength build, and it does specialize in something, which is nice. Prisoner, which Prisoner has none of the highest stats in anything, and the lowest amount of faith.
Yes, mostly dex and intelligence.
Yep, they are mostly dex and intelligence, with having okay vigor, mind, endurance, and strength. Not so much arcane and faith, but that's okay. Armor, kind of weird, because the Prisoner helmet actually is pretty good at just blocking stuff. It actually does give you
Yeah.
good damage resist, but the other parts of the clothing just don't. That's
Yeah, the mask is pretty heavy too.
That is true, yeah. The mask is really heavy at 8.5. You do start out with Magic Glintstone Blade, which is a pretty good spell to be using. I do like that one.
Yeah, it's just kind of slow since it takes some time to actually launch it.
Yeah, that's true. You got the S-Stock, which is a pretty good starting weapon. It's pretty nice overall. Has good reach, has good damage. You got the Glintstone Staff, one of the 2 staffs that you can start out with for casting spells. About the same as the Astrologer Staff for all intents and purposes. You're going to switch it out for the Meteorite Staff. And then you've got the Rift Shield, which is a unique shield.
It does have Care and Retaliation.
Yes, it does have Care and Retaliation, which is nice. It also has apparently a passive of raising focus by 40. I wasn't even aware of that, so that's kind of
Oh.
nice. Gear's actually not too bad with Prisoner. Not great, but not terrible. Stats are okay if you're going to go with a Dex Intelligence build.
Yeah, if you want to use like Moonveil with it. Really leaning towards Dexterity and Intelligence, which is fine. Like that's still a pretty good build. But
Yeah, I would agree. I think Prisoner's probably like B tier for me because of the starting equipment's a little bit strange.
yeah, probably.
But if you want to go with Dex Intelligence build, pretty decent. So, yeah, B tier for Prisoner. Up next, we got Prophet, going from the least faithful to the most faithful, although Prophet sucks at Dex, and they also suck at... They suck at Endurance, and they suck at Intelligence. They're not very intelligent.
Yep, they're the Incantation build.
Yeah, which incantations can be pretty strong. Armor, Prophet stuff is nothing to really talk about. It's not very strong.
Yeah, and you don't start with gloves.
Yeah, that's true. You're missing a piece of armor. I guess the prisoner too is missing gloves. The equipment's actually pretty good though, because you get heal. Heal is really nice. It does cost a decent amount of FP to the start, but that's okay. You got Catch Flame, which is a great spell if you want to be chucking that at things. You got the Short Spear, which is a pretty great early weapon too. Good reach, good damage. You got the Finger Seal to actually be using that, and then you have the Rickety Shield, which is a pretty garbage shield, but it doesn't weigh anything, so...
Yeah, I think it is the lightest shield.
Yeah. If you just want parry and the lightest shield, then Rickety Shield is for you. If you want anything better, there are better options.
Yeah, the only downside is like the lower endurance can just make fitting gear onto it a bit rough.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because you're going to have to build some endurance if you want some heavier armors or a heavier shield or even potentially heavier weapons. Which some of the early Faith weapons are fairly heavy if you want to use like the Golden Halberd or you want to use like Winged Scythe, but again, we wouldn't really recommend that.
Although you do start with Catch Flame, which is like one of the highest DPS incantations.
That is true. Yeah, it's one of the best incantations, especially for how cheap it is, because it only costs 10 FP every time you use it and only requires 8 Faith, so... I mean,
it's really spammable.
Yeah. Plus, if you do want to go with a holy build, this isn't a terrible option to go with a holy build.
If you're going more pure Faith.
Yeah.
If you're specializing into like Faith Strength or Faith Dex, some of the other ones can be about the same, if not better for it.
Yeah, that's true. Because you could go Faith Hero and go Strength that way, and that would also be better.
Also, it just depends on the amount of mind that you want.
Yeah.
Since Hero starts at the lower amount, so if you just intend on hitting things with like the Faith Strength weapons, it can actually be a better starting class for that sort of build.
Yeah.
But
you just
otherwise,
plan
the
on...
level up's the same.
Yeah. That's fair. Alright. I'm thinking Prophet's like another B tier for me.
Oh, yeah.
Or do you think higher?
Depends. I kind of like starting with Prophet, but it's just getting stuff early can be a bit rough.
Yeah.
Catch Flame is good, but you have to be right up next to the thing to hit it with it.
Alright, I'll put Prophet at the top of B tier, but we might be moving it up to A tier by the end of this. We'll see. Next we got Samurai, which Samurai is pretty good. They actually don't have the lowest stat in anything but the highest amount of endurance. And they have pretty good strength dex spread as well as good, okay vigor.
It's kind of lower on the caster stats.
Yeah, lower on the caster stats. Armor's pretty decent because it's fairly lightweight and does protect you decently well. Starting equipment, you got the Uchi Katana, which is arguably the best starting weapon in the whole game.
Yeah, probably.
It's fast, it's got bleed, doesn't weigh that much. Got Unsheath as the Ash. Really good Ash, too.
Yeah, really good at stance breaking bosses early.
Then you got the Longbow, which can be kind of useful early on. Probably won't be, it's not going to be your primary weapon. Your Uchi Katana will be. But useful for taking out scarabs or just shooting things at a distance to initiate a fight. You start out with arrows and fire arrows, which is pretty cool. And then you get the Red Thorn Shield, which is kind of just an average shield. Nothing real special about it.
Yeah.
Fairly lightweight though, only 1.5, so not that much heavier than the Rickety Shield. I think Samurai is probably one of the best starting classes just from the Uchi Katana and just from having well-rounded stats.
Yeah, it's really easy to go like quality builds on it. The starting equipment's just really strong.
Yeah, all of that is pretty good, so I think Samurai goes right up to S tier.
Yeah, good for either dex or quality or... You could even go into strength, like 15 dex does hit a lot of strength weapons too, so...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because usually you don't need more than that for a lot of strength-based weapons. Speaking of solid starts, we have Vagabond next.
Yeah.
Which Vagabond has the most vigor, the least arcane, which is probably the two stats that you want to have the most and least with at the start.
Yeah.
Because vigor's, again, probably the most important stat to start out with, and arcane doesn't really matter right away just because there's not a whole lot of weapons you can go into right away with arcane. You also still have good strength, good dex, and then okay mind and endurance, low on the caster stats, but you're the knight.
Yeah, it's just the generally good melee class. It's like the class you pick when you want to go melee, but you don't know what kind of melee you want to go.
Yeah. Vagabond's a really good choice there. And you do have really good starting equipment too. The Vagabond armor is on the heavier side, but pretty protective. Doesn't quite get you to the amount of poise to tank through hits at like 50 poise, but It's close, so you can throw on some other stuff. You also start out with some of the best just weapons, where you get the longsword, one of the best straight swords just to start out with. You get the halberd, a really great weapon too. And you also get the heater shield, which has 100% physical negation. Slightly heavy on the shield side for the starting classes, but still not too heavy.
Yeah, you do also start out at a heavy load with all your gear on.
That is true,
So
yeah. You do want to unequip something.
Yeah, just switch something off so you're medium.
Yeah. Like either just have the longsword and the shield or have the halberd. That's usually the way I do it.
Yeah, just one or the other.
And then you're good to go. But yeah, Vagabond is probably also S tier with Samurai, because it's just the class you pick when you just want to hit stuff, but you don't know exactly how you want to hit it, and you can kind of build into whatever you want after that.
Yeah, you can go pure strength, you can go strength dex, you can just go dex. You can go pretty much any melee-oriented build you want with Vagabond.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, Vagabond, S tier, really good early game choice. Up next we got Warrior, which Warrior's kind of an interesting one too. They have the most amount of dex out of any of the classes at 16. They have kind of average everything else stats though, with a little bit lower on the arcane side, or on the caster side.
Can go like dexterity, intelligence as well, like the prisoner.
Yeah.
Since they do still start with 10 intelligence. They only start with 10 strength though.
That is true. So you're probably going to have to put some into strength, even if you're going with some of the dex weapons, like certain spears. For armor, you get all of the warrior stuff, which the warrior stuff is pretty good. It's not that heavy, and it does protect you very well. It's very similar to like the samurai's armor.
You still get a lot of vigor to start with.
No, you start out with 11, so not the most.
Yeah, and you start at level 8, so you're kind of a higher level too.
That is true. For weapons, you start out with double scimitars, which scimitars are really awesome, especially 2 of them, because power stancing, curved swords is just really good in general. And then you also get the riveted wooden shield, which is kind of just a mass shield, like a lot of these shields, similar to like samurai shield.
Yeah, it's a starter shield.
Yeah, I would say Warrior is not as good as Samurai or Vagabond. I don't even know if it's as strong as Astrologer or Hero, because at least they specialize more. This one's okay on specialization, though.
Yeah, it does specialize really heavily towards dex, but Samurai kind of does the same thing a bit better.
That is true. And you do even start out with arguably better... Well, I don't know. Double Scimitar is pretty good, but you can get 2 Uchikatanas right away, and then I would say 2 Uchikatanas is better than 2 Scimitars for most things.
Yeah, the curved sword's generally a bit better once you can actually put like statuses on them.
Yeah, that's true.
Which you can't really do early. You kind of have to get quite a bit into the game to get like the black whetstone, wet blade, to actually put like the arcane sort of ones on weapons.
I don't know. You think Warrior in B tier?
Yeah, probably.
I don't think it's as bad as Confessor or Bandit, even though these aren't really that bad either, but I think it's not as good as some of these other ones.
Yeah.
So, alright. Yeah, B tier Warrior. And then last but not least, we've got Wretch, which has the advantage of starting out at level 1.
Yes.
You also get the advantage of starting out naked, if that is an advantage. And you get the strongest starting weapon, the club. I don't know if it's actually the strongest, probably not. But it's not a terrible weapon.
Yeah, it's not bad. You don't have any armor on at all, and armor is actually kind of hard to find early game.
That is true, yeah. That's kind of rough. You'll start out with 10 in every stat, so you're a generalist for everything. When we were talking about this earlier, Rob also pointed out that if you ever want to respec your character later on into the game, Wretch is probably the best one to do that with, because you could build it into whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, and you're only going to be like, I think it's generally around like 2 to 3 points worse than like a class that specializes at it.
Yeah, so pretty comparable. In late game, that really won't matter. And late game, I hope you have armor, you're not still running around naked, but...
Yeah, well, it is the best at specializing to very specific builds.
That is true, yeah.
Like Intelligence Faith, it's the only one that doesn't start with below 10 in one or the other. And you can just go full vigor if you want, and you will have more vigor than any other class will at the level that you're at.
So you can face tank through stuff. It's mostly like the downside of playing Wretch is that you don't start out with any armor and your weapon is just kind of okay.
Yeah, and you kind of have to find gear for whatever build you want to go into.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, you don't already have like a set template that you're kind of building towards.
Yeah, like if you want to go like intelligence with it, like you don't start with a staff.
Or
So
spells.
yeah, so you have to go find a staff and like get some spells.
Wretch is okay. I wouldn't really recommend it for newer players though.
Yeah, probably not.
Like if you're brand new to the game, I would recommend something like Samurai or Vagabond a lot more than Wretch.
Yeah.
Wretch,
Yeah.
I assume you know what you're already doing, so you kind of know what the downsides are to the class.
Probably around C tier, like.
With these other ones?
Yeah, it's.
Do you think
I'd say it's probably better than the other ones.
better? Yeah.
But
which is kind of funny. Starting out naked with a club is better than going with Confessor or Bandit to start out with. Yeah, because Bandit really can't use their starting stats as well. They do have okay equipment, and then Confessor, again, just doesn't really specialize in anything, and is kind of just a generalist. But so is Wretch, but you can build them easier into a generalist.
Yeah, which is just more of a generalist than Confessor is.
Yeah, so... Alright, would you move any of these around, or move the order of them around? Did you want to move Prophet up to A? Do you think they're as good as Hero and Astrologer, or do you think they're more on par with Prisoner and Warrior?
Yeah, it might be more on par with like Astrologer and Hero.
Okay.
This is a really good specialist.
Okay, we can move Prophet up to A then.